Welcome to 6th grade math. Place 2 and 7/8 on the number line. Notice that it falls between 2 and 3. And we know that those smaller lines between 2 and 3 are 8s because there's a 2 and 4/8, which is written as 4/8 to illustrate that it's an 8s. It should be, or it could be written as 2.5. So we'll just count 7 lines over and we'll place it there. Round 2 and 7/8 to the nearest half. Well, if you look at the number line, we're going to round it to 3 because it's 7/8 is almost another whole number. And 2 and 4/8 is equivalent to 2.5. We use it on the number line above as the halfway point, and 8s to easily round to the nearest half. It is often helpful to be able to round fractions and mixed numbers to the nearest half in real-world situations. To round fractions and mixed numbers to the nearest half, you can use the following guidelines. Rounding to the nearest half will round up if the numerator is almost as large as the denominator, and round the number up to the next whole number. Example 7/8. 7 is almost as large as 8, so 7/8 rounds to 1. Round to a half. If the numerator is about half of the denominator, round the fraction to a half. Example 2 and 3/8. 3 is about half of 8, so 2 and 3/8 rounds to 2.5. Round down. If the numerator is much smaller than the denominator, round the number down to the previous whole number. Example 1/8. 1 is much smaller than 8, so it's going to round to 0. Scaffolding questions. Draw a 3 unit by 7 unit rectangle. So we have a grid that's 3 by 7. And we're going to shade 4/7 of the rectangle. So we can do that quickly by, we know that each row has 7 squares. So if we shade 4 out of each 7, we'll shade 4/7 out of the whole grid. How many squares in the rectangle did we shade? 12. We can see that by counting those. How many squares are left unshaded? 9. About how much of the rectangle do you think we shaded? None, half, or all? Half, because it looks like the shaded area covers about half of the rectangle. So we're going to use a 3 unit by 7 unit grid again. And this time we're going to shade 1/7 of the rectangle. So there is 1/7, and again we can just count. We can shade 1 of each row of 7. How many squares did we shade? 3. How many squares are left unshaded? 18. About how much of the rectangle do you think we shaded? None, half, or all? Pretty obvious to me that it looks like none, because it looks like the shaded area barely covers any of the rectangle. So we're going to have another 3 by 7 rectangle, and this time we're going to shade 6/7. So once again, we'll shade 6 out of each 7, or 6 out of each row of 7. And how many squares in the rectangle did we shade? 18. How many squares are left unshaded? 3. About how much of the rectangle do you think we shaded? None, half, or all? So we've shaded almost the whole rectangle this time. So we're going to say all, because it looks like the shaded area covers most of the rectangle. Round to the nearest half. Round 3 and a 6 to the nearest half. So we have a number line with 3 to 4 on it, and we see that there's 3.5. 3 and 1/6. If we were to count the lines in between 3 and 4, it would be 5 lines, which means it's divided into 6 spaces. So we know that 1/6 would be that first line after the 3. The numerator of 1/6 is much smaller than the denominator, which means that the numerator 1 is much smaller than the denominator 6. So 3 and 1/6 rounds to 3. And you can see that visually on a number line. Check your progress. Round each number to the nearest half. We have 8 and 1/12. We're going to round that to 8 because 1 is much, much smaller than 12. And it's not even close to half of 12, which is 6. 2 and 9/10. 9 is almost 10, so we can round that to 3. 2 9s. If you're not sure, think about what a half is, and half of 9 is 4.5. So because 2 is closer to 0 than 4.5, we're going to say 0. 5/12. Ask yourself what half of 12 is. That's 6. So 5 is almost 6, which is half of 12. So we're going to round that to half. Then we have 1 and 2/5. And I would again ask yourself, what is half of 5? It's 2.5. 2 is almost 2.5. So we're going to round this to 1.5. 4 and 3/7. What is half of 7? It's 3.5. So 3 is almost 3. So we can round 4 and 3/7 to 4.5. Common fractions, 1/3 and 2/3, each round to a half. 1/4 can be rounded down. 3/4 can be rounded up. Example, measure to the nearest half. Find the length of the leaf to the nearest ½ inch. So, since 5 is about half of 8, 1 and 5/8 rounds to 1.5. See that where they show us that the leaf is 1 and 5/8 inches long. So we're going to round that to 1.5. Sometimes you should round a number down when it is better for a measure to be smaller than too large. Sometimes you should round, other times you should round a number up, despite what the rule says. Real world example. Pet store sells pet collars in different lengths. Jonathan measures his distance around his puppy's neck to be 11 1/4 inches. Should he buy the 11-inch collar or the 12-inch collar? Even though 11 1/4 inch rounds down to 11, the puppy's neck is too large for the 11-inch collar. Jonathan should buy the 12-inch collar. Otherwise, he's not going to be able to put the collar around his dog's neck. And how does a veterinarian use math? A veterinarian uses math to calculate the proper dosages of medication for different sized animals. Check your progress. The Turners are buying a sofa for their basement. The width of the basement door is 29 3/4 inches. Should they round 29 3/4 inches up or down? And explain your reasoning. I'm going to round it down. By rounding 29 3/4 inches down to 29 inches, then any sofa they purchase that has a depth of at most 29.5 inches will fit. Additional questions. Round 6 and 4/5 to the nearest half. 4/5 is almost another whole, so we're going to round that up to 7. Find the length of the line segment to the nearest ½ inch. So if we look and we see 0 to 1, and it's divided, the smaller lines are as small as 8ths. So if we go one more line past 1, it's going to be 1 1/8. So 1/8 is pretty close to 0 because 1 is very far away from 8. 1 is also very far away from 4, which is half of 8. So we're going to round down to 1 inch. And decorating, there is a 4 3/4 foot gap between the entertainment center and a wall in a family's living room. Should the family purchase a 5-foot wide bookshelf or a 4.5-foot wide bookshelf? And explain your reasoning. So they have a 4 3/4 gap between the entertainment center and a wall, and they need to round it because they can only buy a 4.5 or a 5-foot wide bookshelf. What's going to happen if they buy a 4.5-foot wide bookshelf? There's still going to be a little bit of a gap, right? Well, what happens if they buy a 5-foot wide bookshelf? Don't think there's going to be room for a 5-foot wide bookshelf in a gap that's 4 3/4 foot. So 5 feet is greater than 4 3/4 feet, so the 5-foot bookshelf won't fit in the space. The family should round 4 3/4 down and buy the 4.5-foot wide bookshelf. Okay, so there is your homework. Head over to Google Classrooms to submit it and have a great night. Thank you.